Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. Welcome, guys, to How the...
Well, that's nice. Today's day, September 14th, 2022, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, on How the Frack We Got Here. Crap, this is probably the worst intro I've ever done. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Yeah, wonderful way to start. With that being said, guys, we do try to watch our language on this podcast, as well as there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so your discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. You got love segues. All right, so what do we got here for the middle of the week? Well, interestingly enough, I keep saying this all the time, that we are starting to see a lot of strikes, a lot of vacancies, and it's hitting a lot more than just jobways. I'm not talking about the railroad strike that is possibly planning to happen this Friday, unless something is averted. I'm not talking about the food service industry, where it's a little bit longer, or it takes a little bit longer, you're waiting a little while longer to get your food in most places, unless you're Chick-fil-A and you treat people right, or your Costco, you treat people right, or Publix, or many other businesses out there that are trying to do their best for their employees, and it shows because they're fully staffed. However, I did talk about this last week that Seattle, especially their teachers at union, was on strike since the beginning of school. I keep saying this all the time, that when it comes to educators, they really, really, really do not ask for much. Even more so that, again, like I said before, the teachers that actually did strike in Seattle did actually come to a tentative agreement. So as of this moment, hang on a second. There we go. So as of this moment, they are in a tentative agreement to head back to class after a week-long teacher strike. And what's so amazing about this that I wanted to point out, because with the resolution suspended, they went from 95%, almost nearly all of them voting to approve the strikes, to 50% of them voted to suspend it. Now, of course, their main issues, was getting, more pay, better suited to student to teacher, better ratio of student to teacher. If I find worse, that'll be great. And they actually will get it because in order for this, because they did actually do some conditions, they will get an increase in pay. Classrooms will be ratioed to where teachers will be more effective to help students. And that's just a part of the benefits package that the union of these teachers are accepting. So it does, of course, tentatively end the strike in Seattle. And I point this out, guys, all the time, that with these strikes, whether it be teachers, whether it be really any industry, because almost every industry out there in this pandemic is going to be seeing a shortage. But what is amazing to me is the level of, or I should say lack of attention, really, the lack of attention that's been given to educators. Because if you really run the numbers right now, America is facing a lot of crises, but the main thing is education and ensuring that enough people who are qualified to be educators are there to teach our children. Because if we go about this next report, it could be slightly alarming that, yes, we may be quelling these teacher strikes one at a time, but in the grand sense of it all, America is about to have a foregone education issue, and it needs to actually be addressed as soon as humanly possible.
After 2 years of COVID closures and online learning, school is back in session across the country, but districts from coast to coast still have staffing holes to fill. Here's the teacher shortage by the numbers. There were 8.1 million public school employees in March of 2020, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That number slumped to 7.3 million just 2 months later as Zoom became the new reality. The school workforce has since started to climb back with a current nationwide shortage heading into this year of about 360,000 positions. A survey just released by the School Superintendents Association found more than 20% of school leaders report a teacher vacancy rate of 6% or more. And it's not just teachers. Pennsylvania's education secretary said last week they still need about 3,000 more bus drivers just to make sure that kids are able to get to class. So why the shortage? 85% of superintendents said they simply don't have enough applicants to fill the jobs. 54% reported a desire among educators for better wages, with many having to pay out of pocket for their own supplies. And 45% cited teacher burnout, among other factors. What's the answer? For some schools, it boils down to money. Many teachers in Las Vegas will get their first half of their $5,000 retention bonuses by the end of this month.
That's what it comes down to. And it is as the funny part is, as literal as they try to make it seem, it's that simple. And if there has ever been any gangster, casino, Goodfellas, Martin Scorsese movie has taught you, money changes things. And it's amazing where people go. It's like, I cannot believe in 2022, we are still sitting here saying, how can we solve this shortage of workers and employees, and how can we solve all this? When a lot of us already know the answer, you pay. You don't shame your workers. You don't quiet quit them or shame them. You don't sit there and say they're not here, they're out for themselves, because that's what businesses are. Every time a business lets go of employees, it's a smart decision. Every time an employee decides this job is not for them, regardless of tenure, they're seen as shifty or unstable or can't be trusted or wondering if they're going to just hop onto the next boat. I say it all the time, in this day and age, it is not the 1970s anymore. It isn't. It's not the 50s. It's not the 50s, the 60s, or 70s where you had long-standing work relationships with one company, where one company paid for the longest time. For all those that can remember, because like I said, I'm an 80s baby. For the majority up until about 2008. 2008 was the first time I ever saw that I had to pay insurance. I had to pay some of my insurance at my job. That was the first and only time, because beforehand, insurance was paid by your employer. You never heard of a thing as a health savings account. You never heard of a thing as you having to pay a premium or out of pocket. For the majority of us during that time, and those that are older than me can tell you a time where the employer paid the insurance. You just showed the card when you get hurt, or showed the card when you get checked out, or showed the card when you pick up your prescription. That was it. Nowadays, companies don't want to do it. It is amazing how these very same companies and state and local governments all look at people as they look at them as literal expendables. The whole thing of, there's a dime for every one of you. If one of you if you were to quit tomorrow, there'll be someone happily there to take your place. That was the business mentality. From the 90s and up. From the 90s and up, it went from you're being honored, you're being appreciated, you're being cherished, to like the job or someone else can do it for you. Or we can put you on definite vacation, or we can give you whatever you need, but it won't be here. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because what happened in the 90s is affecting what's happening right now. It just gets worse. Instead of companies realizing that, yes, we have to pay people more, instead of employers sitting there saying, yes, we'll do more for our workers, instead of employers doing more for the employees, now it's trying to figure out, how can I still keep my bottom line? How can I still keep the profits rolling Even though I have to sit here and let people go, it's like, we're sorry we let you go, but hey, you can't mess with the church's money. But here's the problem when you do that. When you start affecting areas, teachers, for one, you start affecting teachers, kids are affected. In the grand scheme of things, when you start to go after these areas where they affect more than one, the effects are felt everywhere. Like right now, I'll even say it, in Middle Tennessee, we're short on teachers by over 1,000. Over 1,000 plus teaching positions are open. And school systems are scrambling. Public school, I feel bad for every kid that's in public school because they have to deal with almost a near skeleton crew of teachers, school personnel, and principals trying to keep these places running. But let's be honest, it goes back to what they said. If teachers don't get paid, they're paying out of their own pocket for supplies and assistance. And the big thing, teacher burnout. The one thing that not only do teachers and everyone else experiences, because burnout is literally one of the truest examples of equal opportunity. If you worked at a job long enough and you didn't give yourself a break, vacation, or anything of that nature, you have experienced burnout. And again, we cannot, above all else, have burnouts in areas such as teaching or nursing. Because again, these are areas that if you take them out the equation, they'll affect more than one. But you know how you solve that? Money. The problem is you're always going to run into people who are going to give every excuse in the world not to give these well-earned workers exactly what they deserve.
Thousands of Minnesota nurses are back on the picket line. This is day 2 of a 3-day statewide strike. Nurses like Angela Bichetti say they are fed up and underpaid.
We need to have say. We are tired of our hospitals saying we don't have enough. There's nothing I can do. That costs too much. But in the end, our patients are suffering.
In Minnesota, nurses from 15 different hospitals are asking for a 30% wage increase over the next 3 years. Before negotiations fell apart, those hospitals offered a 10 to 12% increase.
We've indicated a willingness to negotiate reasonable amounts above that. But right now, the nurses' position is just unrealistic and unaffordable.
But many nurses say they're at a breaking point. There was a nationwide nursing shortage before COVID-19. The pandemic made it worse. As hospitals across the country were pushed to the brink, life as a nurse became more complicated and more demanding, leading to a mass exodus. There are 37,000 fewer healthcare workers today than there were in February 2020, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, meaning travel nurses became increasingly vital. And that's part of the frustration. These nurses say hospitals are willing to spend a lot of money to hire travel nurses, but unwilling to offer similar salaries to their full-time workers.
We didn't want to come out here. We gave them that 10-day legal notice, but in the end, they could have avoided all of this. They're offering $9,000 to $13,000 for those travel nurses. They could have put a fraction of that into the nurses behind me and our patients. We wouldn't be here today.
Hey, everybody. So I wish you didn't have to be here, but it's what we have to do.
Minnesota's governor out showing support for the nurses today.
On behalf of 5.7 million Minnesotans, thank you.
The strike is set to end on Thursday, but the two sides are far from a resolution. Negotiations between 7 hospital groups and the Minnesota's Nurses Association failed last week. Negotiations set for Thursday have been canceled, a troubling sign as a recent survey showed almost 2/3 of nurses less committed to the profession post-pandemic, but perhaps a glimmer of hope in next door Wisconsin.
We're extremely pleased that we're able to work out an agreement to avert the work stoppage.
One of the state's largest hospitals narrowly avoided a strike just days ago after reaching an agreement with their nurses 24 hours before a planned walkout.
And Allison Barber joins us now on set. And Allison, thanks for being here. As you mentioned in your story, this strike already has an end date. So what happens if it ends without a deal?
Yeah, so the nurses say they will go back to work come Thursday if the strike ends without a deal. There's a window where there's the possibility of the union voting and saying, hey, we're going to strike again. But ultimately, they say that they are hoping that this strike and these 3 days are enough for the hospitals to realize they need to come back to the table and that they will restart negotiations. Whether or not that happens, that remains to be seen, but that's the hope, at least from the nurses union.
A lot to watch.
And again, tell me which part of that sounds scary. The scary part that, as they said before, 2 years have passed, there are 37,000 less nurses out there. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're a traveling nurse, first and foremost, if you're a traveling nurse, if your words are hard, apparently for me on this podcast, if you're a traveling nurse, it is Christmas for you guys. Christmas. And I'm not knocking traveling nurses. Traveling nurses are making a mint right now because of the fact that there are shortages in each of these hospital systems. A traveling nurse right now can literally write their own ticket. I kid you not, not to say their name, but traveling nurses I know literally went on a tour, if you will, for like the last 5 months out of my home state of Tennessee. Some of them I knew went on a road tour. Road tour sounds kind of bad as a traveling nurse, but that's what they call it. When I know one friend of mine, literally he was at 5 different states for 3 months. He came back and bought a house. That alone tells you compensation-wise what these traveling nurses are making. At the same time, it does not surprise me that, just like the nurse said in the video, it is amazing how much they'll pay traveling nurses, but won't pay the ones that will gladly show up and do the work, but you'll contract the traveling nurses because, for the most part, traveling nurses can really call their own mark, really. But with those nurses that come to work every day, this is what I keep saying. Nurses, there's a nurse shortage. Pay the nurses more. If you pay the nurses more, you won't have a shortage. If you pay teachers more, you won't have a shortage. If you pay fast food workers more, you won't have a shortage. It is amazing how every time the status quo never changes. It never changes when they're used to the profits they're making. But if you sit there and say, well, if you only paid your workers more, then they look at it's like, well, why do we need to do that? Because it's not the 90s anymore. It's not the 90s anymore. Because you have less nurses than you have on staff. You have less teachers than you have on staff. And like I said, when you start affecting these areas, when you start taking out the personnel that affect multitudes, it shows. But again, I want nurses and teachers, educators across the board, and nice healthcare professionals across the board, really. Pay them. That simple. Moving right along, though, guys, I hate to keep bringing up the failure in chief, but apparently somebody needs to tell Trump about his lawyers that if the DOJ wants to unseal more records in a case that you created, that you requested a special master look over because your failure in chief did not understand the Constitution, did not understand his powers, that he wished he did have about declassifying documents that were in his possession that he took willingly, and the fact that the FBI had a legal right to come down there and actually take said documents because you could have probably violated the Espionage Act, because you probably took documents that were violating national security, and the DOJ wants to tell more of the documents you've taken, might be time to say you're sorry and just take an L before you wind up in jail.
But some new stuff that we were just finding out about, really in the last hour, not even. The Justice Department is now telling the judge who approved the search at Mar-a-Lago they want to unseal more of the search warrant affidavit. Basically, the reason behind why the Fed said they needed to go to Mr. Trump's home, where they found hundreds of classified documents. I want to bring in Tom Winter here. So basically, Tom, in super plain English, the DOJ is saying, we will tell the public more than what we previously have told them. Why and what's new that we're finding out tonight?
Right. So it's 9 paragraphs in part or in full that have been unredacted. The judge agreeing with the Justice Department, unredacting them, as you said, Hallie, within the last hour or so. What the Justice Department said is, look, we've already talked about some of this stuff in the ongoing special master litigation. In other words, how these documents are going to be processed, how the search warrant materials that were seized are going to be looked at by the Justice Department. There's that ongoing fight I know you've talked a lot about, but this has now come up in the course of the search warrant, the initial search warrant that we filed in this case. We already got permission from the judge to unseal certain portions of it for that special master litigation. Now, can we just unseal the same portions in the search warrant affidavit? And they've been able to do so. Just a few key points. One, got some new information as far as what was handed over in an envelope later on in the process by Trump's own attorneys, specifically that some of the documents, I believe approximately 17, were labeled top secret. Some came from FISA, that's the very sensitive electronic surveillance of foreign nationals. Some came from information that might be tied to human sources overseas that were provided for the U.S. intelligence community. Another thing that we learned is that the assertions from Trump's attorneys as far as what was handed over and not handed over, they say came from what they were specifically told. Now, they don't say who told them that they had handed over all the documents, but they are relying on whoever told them that. Another key component to it, Hallie, is that in their assertions, they said, look, we've looked through the entire property. The only place where these documents that you all are looking for could be found is in this basement storage room at Mar-a-Lago. And now, according to the Justice Department and what we've been reporting for weeks, Hallie, is that there was not an insignificant amount of material that was found in the former president's own personal office. So there appears to be some pretty stark differences and contradictions between what Trump's attorneys told the Justice Department and what they ultimately found.
Okay, so what that basically means is if the DOJ wants to sit there and say, okay, let's release more documents that we found in you. If the DOJ, Department of Justice, says that they want to go ahead and release more of the documents in your possession, that means that they know something. And if they know something, it is not good for the former failure in chief. It is not. Especially when they're looking at it and they're thinking, okay, does this violate the Espionage Act? Like I said, my scary again, none of this has been confirmed as far as what's been released, but the fact that they do want to release it, and these are top secret documents, and we know for the fact that apparently they were so top secret that the FBI had to request special clearance to view them. I'm just thinking to myself, please, oh please, do not let it be nuclear information. That's all I ask. Because I can imagine Trump having dirt on our allies and on our enemies and actually being sold as being, and I can imagine them being sold at a price. Keep in mind, the former failure in chief is compromised president. The Saudis own a piece, the Russians own a piece. I wouldn't be surprised if China got their piece too. The point I'm making out of all this is going to get interesting. Not only the fact that, again, Trump is facing multiple lawsuits from different directions and the DOJ breathing down his neck. Well, his allies, those that rode with him, well, all the rats are about to jump from this ship because the DOJ is not only wanting to have those documents released in the lawsuit that Donald Trump brought against them, they're actually going after his allies as well.
Signs the Department of Justice is expanding its investigation around former President Trump, his campaign's efforts to overturn the election, and links to January 6th. About 40 subpoenas have been issued to Trump associates and at least 2 phones seized over the last week. Today, a senior DOJ official addressed this burst of activity.
It is important for us to preserve all relevant evidence in that investigation and any other investigation.
In the separate Mar-a-Lago classified secrets probe, tonight, in a new filing, the DOJ notes the Trump team does not actually assert, much less provide any evidence, that any of the seized records have been declassified. Mr. Trump was back in the D.C. area Monday visiting his Virginia golf property. Among his allies under subpoena, Bernard Kerik, former New York City police commissioner who had been hired to pursue the Trump campaign's claims of election fraud. Carrick said more than 100 people are named in the subpoena.
They're targeting everybody around him.
A Trump spokesman has responded to the dozens of subpoenas, saying the DOJ has cast a blind net to silence and intimidate Republicans, and argues the Department of Justice has been weaponized.
There it is, folks. It's Biden's Department of Justice. He's weaponizing the FBI against our Lord and Savior Donald Trump. We need to pray for Jesus' chosen warrior. At least that's how they sound on Fox News anyway. I'm not surprised by that. Again, this is what happens when the DOJ, again, not weaponized. The DOJ would have done this to a Democrat if a Democrat was dumb enough to do this. Unfortunately, we have nothing in pre-recorded history that sits there and says that a Democrat, when they were president, decided to take top secret documents from the White House when they were no longer president. But I'm sure in the off 1 in a million chance it happens, I think the Department of Justice will do the same. What, again, for all those people on the conservative, Fox News, Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens side of things, they'll convince you that's a witch hunt. They'll convince you that they've been out to get Trump ever since he wanted to become president. Not true. Matter of fact, nobody was looking at Trump except at the time, the Manhattan district attorney that wanted to go after Trump over his land dealings and the pricing of his land, that the many lawsuits from people he stepped over the years that did construction or various other food services for him. The only thing that makes sense is that why would the FBI and the Department of Justice go after you unless you had documents in your possession that you are not supposed to have? It's not a witch hunt, ladies and gentlemen. That his allies, again, all of them who are riding with him, it is almost like a RICO case for white. It's like a RICO case for Mayo folks. That's what it is. You get one, you get them all. And that's what they're doing. Not surprised at all. But again, it's going to be fun to watch the failure in chief and company go down in flames. But like I said, Al Capone didn't go down for all the murders he allegedly did and extortion, things of that nature. He went down by tax evasion. How interestingly fitting it would be that the former failure in chief did not go down from his various alleged Ponzi scheme businesses and, conism, that he went down because he took a document that he wasn't supposed to take. How deliciously different that would be that he goes down from that. We'll follow that story as it goes along. But in the meantime, guys, I hate to bring this up because a lot of people don't think that there's still a diversity issue when it comes to Black people and money. I mean, for the simple fact of the matter is, yes, we are. If you ever ask that question, it's like, am I getting paid more, or am I getting more than this, or am I getting stifled? Here's my big fear. Okay. And this will go into the story I'm talking about. My big fear is that I always want to win the lottery. I play every once in a while. Hey, if I hit the lottery, cool. I already have in my mind what I want to do. But I always had this fantasy. I had this daydream, you will, that not only did I win the lottery, not only did I have the check. I don't care. In my dream it was the big check, but just go with me on this. But had the big check in my hand, went to my bank, was ready to sign the numbers because I was so ready to look down on my bank, on my app, on my phone. And I was so ready to see those numbers just appear. And I'm like, let's be honest. When you see numbers appear in your bank account and there's not a negative sign in front of it, immediate peace. Immediate peace. You feel, you know what? The world, your house can be burning down, but you got money in the bank. You're good. You can just go buy another house. That's peace. That's peace I was talking about. But anyway, going to the bank, you're about to give them the check because you know where you got the check from. You got it from the state or whatever license or whatever gambling or lottery place that you got it from. You know it's good. You know it's sanctioned by the state. No problem, right? Until you're told there is a problem. You're told it's fake. And the reason why I say it was a daydream for me, but in reality, it actually did happen. Happened to this woman. Happened to this woman right here who won money at a casino, right? Went to her bank and was told that the check was fraudulent. The woman right there won $12,000 on a slot machine. I could barely win $50, but that's neither here nor there. Neither here nor there. She won $12,000 on a slot machine. Sounds like a pretty good night for her, right? She goes to a bank to open up a savings account and deposit her winnings into an account. She was told there, or I should say she alleges, that 3 white bank officers there told her that the check was fraudulent. Now, imagine being told this. Now, I said allegedly because this case is still being looked into. But imagine you trying to cash a check that you know you got from a state-sanctioned lottery or gaming commission or a casino. You have the money right there. You know there's above. You know you guys are above suspicion, right? Above suspicion. Only to go to a bank and be told your check's not good. Now, stories like this are not beyond the pale. Stories like this, guys, are the sole reason, sole reason why black people always seem to have this, I won't say stigma, but we have this hesitation when it comes to banks. Because you know why? We figure we bank like everybody else. We put our money in there, we use our debit cards, we use the credit cards, we use the personal loans, or any other services that a bank gives you. But we always, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're watching this, as a black person, you're watching my podcast, please correct me if I'm wrong. But even I have that stigma. Like, I've cashed a few $1,000 checks here and there, but do you think for 1 second I don't got it in my mind when that teller's looking at the check, looks at you, and you hear the clickety clacking on the other side, and you're just sitting there. I mean, they're looking down, and then you get those. And you know, the whole facial stuff, the structure changes. It's no longer the "Hi, how are you? Are you here to? Oh, what can I help you with today?" You don't get that anymore. You get the You get the whole staring at the screen thing. Every black person will tell you. The moment we get the whole staring at the screen thing, of course, we ask questions. Is there a problem? Oh no. There's no problem at all. There's no problem at all. It's just 1 second. And they walk off. And now you're wondering, shit, now I know something's up. Because that's the hesitation you feel. That's what that woman felt. Then they came back and sat there and told her, oh, your check's fraudulent. No, it's not. I got that straight from the casino. And to be told all this. And then they didn't want to give her the check back. So if something is fraudulent and you can't, I'm like, I was like, prove it. How is it fraudulent? It came from this casino. Or my personal favorite above all else, where I know most bank tellers, if they're watching this, people that work at a bank will say, well, if the check was fraudulent, you just got to call the number. Call the number, verify the accounts. Because that's what they do at banks anyway. Do the same thing. They do the same thing whenever you buy a car. Whenever you buy a car, you bring a cashier's check, they call the bank. They call the bank on the actual checks. They call the bank on the cashier or the check you try to use. Call the bank, verify it, and the money's there. Cool. Banks, dealerships, do it. Banks, dealerships, and any other place that deals in checks do it all the time. But yet here, because the bank they're talking about is Fifth Third Bank, again, it's under hot water because now the bank is doubling down and saying, quote unquote, we are committed to fair and responsible banking and prohibit discrimination of any kind. From our reviews of the claims, we believe the facts to be different than what is alleged. Our employees are trained to help every customer with their banking needs, and our employees follow procedures to facilitate the opening of any new account. Says Fifth Third Bank spokesperson. Of course, the attorney for the woman in that article I just showed, quote unquote, what happened to Ms. Poog is yet another example of the hurdles and indignities facing Black Americans as they try to get to the day. It is not only young Black men who are profiled. Fortunately, Michigan, which is where that bank was located, has a strong statute prohibiting discrimination in public accommodations, including banks. However, she was able to eventually cash out of the bank. But this is the point I'm making, guys. The point that I'm making was that there is still a diversity problem. Even more so in the workplace, where again, another story. A former AMCO executive alleges racial pay discrimination and retaliation in lawsuit. The plaintiff, Mr. Staley, says that he was a former president. Keep in mind what I said. Actually, that's the gentleman right there. He was a former executive at AMCO, right? Come to find out that he learned from another executive that his salary of $100K plus bonuses was almost 40 grand less than the other vice presidents. And yes, if you're wondering, he does state that the other vice presidents were white. He is the single black executive among AMCO at the time. That alone should be a red flag because, number one, if you haven't noticed, you know when I sit there and say for the longest time, guys, that you probably heard it from companies all the time. You probably hear from companies all the time. Never discuss your pay. Never discuss your pay. Number first and foremost, that's bullshit. There is no law out there that says you cannot discuss your pay. You cannot discuss your raises among your coworkers because you know why? Businesses have been getting over for years on paying people less for doing the same job, and they're standing right next to you. Do not think for 1 second that you should not be talking about pay like it's illegal or a sin or unprofessional. No, discuss your pay. I highly encourage that. Discuss your pay. When y'all all do the same job, you should all be being paid accordingly and fairly and equally. But in the case of Mr. Staley, imagine that you're getting paid 40 grand less. Now, in the grand scheme of things, he was already making 100K plus bonuses, but still, you're getting paid $40,000 less than other executives. And at the same time, bonuses and things that he does, that he claims, that he alleges that he never received, are still out there. Now, here's the thing that, again, this is from the CEO, Mr. Gregory, a sports person said that for Mr. Staley. Mr. Gregory told Mr. Staley that he was disappointed in Mr. Staley for complaining of race discrimination and responded to Mr. Staley's complaint by saying, "You make enough." I think this needs to be seen. I think this needs to be seen. It was literally when he raised concerns of disparate treatment in compensation to those above him, including the CEO. They said that Mr. Gregory told Mr. Staley that he was disappointed in Mr. Staley for complaining of race discrimination and responding to Mr. Staley's complaint by saying, "You make enough." Imagine that. Imagine being sitting there told that, hey, I don't think I'm fairly getting compensated as much as everybody else. You make enough. But to sit there and say that the same CEO, because I said it before, CEOs make millions. Sometimes you make billions. They make CEOs, especially here in America, where the ratio of employer to CEO compensation, the last time I checked, was nearly 495 to 1. If I'm right, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about the employer to CEO salary comparison that's in the US, we are definitely number one in that because it's 495 employees to what one CEO makes. And to have the CEO sit there and tell you, you make enough, what are you complaining about? Just goes to show you that there is still discrimination in the workplace. Even more so that no matter how high you get up on the corporate ladder, you're going to run into individuals like that. And again, this is why we sit there and still say that there needs to be change as far as equal pay, not just for women, but for everyone. But we'll follow that story as it develops. Meanwhile, we have to get back to the police a little bit because, again, this is a story where I sit there and say all the time when it comes to law enforcement. When it comes to law enforcement, I keep saying this all the time. Know the laws in your city and state, because for a lot of police out there, a lot of police are going to bank on your ignorance and their intimidation. Even more so, this situation actually did occur where I have to point this out, where a man was just basically doing his neighbors a solid and watering their flowers. And this could have went very south very fast.
What you doing here, man?
Water flower.
Are they saying that, is that your vehicle?
No.
It's not?
That's the neighbor's vehicle.
The neighbors?
314, I'll be on 13.
Okay.
Yeah,
You live here?
no, I don't live here.
Okay. They saying that this vehicle is not supposed to be here and you're not supposed to be
Who's
here.
saying that?
They called about it. I don't know who called.
I'm supposed to be here. I'm Pastor Jennings. I live across the street.
You're Pastor Jennings?
Yes, I'm looking out for their house while they gone.
Okay.
Watering their flowers.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Now, do you have like ID and
Oh,
all?
no, man. I'm not going to give you no ID.
Why not?
I ain't did nothing wrong.
Well, you look, listen, I'm not saying do nothing wrong.
Doc, listen,
There's a suspicious person.
Look, I used to be a police officer in Goodwater. Don't come here with that. Okay?
Look, man, don't do this to me. There's a suspicious person in the yard, and if you're not one to identify yourself.
I don't have to identify myself. It's not a stop and identify state. That guy know me. He came to my store that got broke in. I live right over there across the street. Who called y'all?
That's what we got to figure out. But first,
he
don't live here. I'm not saying nothing about.
You have no right to approach me if I ain't did nothing suspicious or nothing wrong. Told him I'm a pastor. I pastor, and so I don't want to hear you.
Sir.
You want to lock me up? Lock me up.
Nobody wants to lock
me
you
up.
up.
I'm not showing y'all anything. I'm going to continue to roll these flowers. I don't care who called y'all. Lock me up and see what happens. I want you to.
Hey, man, just come here and talk to us. What?
These back flowers is what I'm gonna do.
Look, man, let me see your phone. Let me see your phone, dude. Just calm down. Okay?
No.
Stop.
I like this.
Okay. We're just trying to talk to you and see.
I don't want to argue with you, okay?
All right, go ahead and do what you got to do, Doc. Do what you got to do. Go on and lock me up.
Look, just have a
seat. It's already
not locked up. You're
it's
just
already a lawsuit, Doc.
Yes, sir.
It's already a
Okay.
lawsuit.
Just have a seat, okay?
Okay, already a lawsuit.
Do you know that gentleman? Back?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Does he have
He lives right there.
Okay, does he have permission here to be watering flowers?
He may because they are friends.
Okay.
And they went out of town today. So
Right.
he may be watering their flowers.
Okay.
It'd be completely normal.
Okay,
That's
is
fine.
that's fine. If he would have said, "Hey, I got this," gave his identification because he's a suspicious person, he said that's not his vehicle; it's their vehicle.
We have
Okay.
a call. Like,
Yeah.
we're here
Okay.
because we're called here. I don't know who called, but somebody did.
Yeah, he lives right there and he would be watering their flowers. This is probably my fault.
Okay, who is Roy Milam? That's you, ain't it?
I'm Michael Jennings, sir.
You're Michael Jennings. Who is Roy Milam? Okay, that's who that vehicle belongs to.
Yeah, that's
Who
all I
lives
know. His name is Roy.
That's who lives here.
That's Roy. I call him Roy and I call his wife Connie, and I've been dealing with him for 7 years that I've been living here.
They are friends.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you called not because of the car, but because you thought you saw someone beside you.
Right. I didn't know it was him.
Yeah,
I'm sorry
I got to
about
keep their
that.
flowers watered. I got to keep their flowers watered while they gone.
sorry.
You okay?
Listen to me, man. Listen to me.
We are
Anytime the police come out and they say we want to identify you, you have to identify yourself because there's a reasonable suspicion. There's a reasonable man. There's
That
a
has to
vehicle.
commit a crime.
There's a reasonable suspicion that you're here. It's not a crime.
Yeah.
If you would have said, yeah, here's my name, here's everything, we were like,
I
okay.
told him my name. I
You
don't
didn't
have
tell
to
me
give
your
him-
name.
I decided he asked me who I was. I said,
You didn't give it to me when I first
Pastor
asked you.
Jennings. Pastor Jennings.
That's not a name.
But
That's
still,
a pastor.
yeah.
I need your
The way
name.
y'all handle this situation was totally wrong.
Well, listen,
You racial profile.
we're not
put it
racial
on him, but
profile.
yes, you did.
No, sir. No, sir. We're not about
I
that.
told
okay?
you I was here watering the flowers. But it's
How do I know that's the truth?
Because I
Anybody,
had the water hose in my hand. I was watering all the flowers.
anybody can pick a hose pipe up.
He is gonna be so pissed when I tell him I got arrested watering his flowers. 7
Well,
years
look,
we've been
look,
friends.
we got that. Look, let's sit back in here.
Okay.
You can sit down. Give me so we can get this going on the ball. All right. What is your social?
I'm not gonna give him a social.
You need to give me your social.
I give you
Pastor.
my name. That's all I'm gonna give you. You're not gonna run no 27 and 28 on me and get me in the system for no reason.
All right. What's
If
your
the girl already done told you who I am.
Okay.
I'm
Yes.
Michael
yes.
Jennings. That's all you
Michael
gonna get.
Jennings.
Michael Jennings.
Okay, so let's go over this for a second. Now, of course, the man that was there was allegedly had a deal with his neighbor about going to water his flowers. Of course, the lady that was talking was also the same woman that called and said about a suspicious person being in the yard. Police roll up, see a person watering flowers, and ask him what he's doing there. Of course, the black man stood there and says, "Well, I don't really have to tell you anything." And the officer's like, "Well, could I at least give your name?" He's like, "Well, I'm Pastor Jennings." And he's like, "Well, is that you got any ID?" He says, "You got any ID?" He says, "I don't have to show you ID." Now, it amazes me so that for the longest part, and I say for the longest part, the officer that was talking did try to de-escalate it, but he kind of gave up. He kind of gave up after a while because, again, who is like the sad? I mean, I have to give the black person credit when he says, "Well, we got this complaint about suspicious character," and I'm like, "You rolled up on me and I was watering flowers." Well, anybody can pick up a hose, but let's think about this for a second. You rolled up on me and I was watering flowers. Now, again, I'm not taking away from the fact that he could have been playing possum. I'm not taking away from the fact that it could have been different than what it was. I am saying that, guys, in so many ways, the officer really could have saved himself a lot of grief. And I know people say this all the time. Well, you know, if the officer stops you, you have to answer their questions. This is why I sit there and say, know the laws where you're at. And the reason why I say that, let's go to the ACLU for a second, shall we? Now, that right there, pretty much in stone. I have been stopped by the public and police. Here's your rights. You have the right to remain silent. You do not have to consent to a search. If you are arrested by police, you have the right to a government-appointed lawyer if you cannot afford one. You do not have to answer questions about where you were born, whether you are a U.S. citizen, or how you entered the country. Separate rules do apply at national borders and airports. The big thing I want everybody to look on here is that this part right here. In some states, you may be required to provide your name if asked to identify yourself, and an officer here may arrest you for refusing to do so. Keep in mind, in some states, because as you saw in that previous video, they didn't arrest him. It was almost not even detained. It was like, well, you know, we're going to arrest you for refusing to do so. Now, I will say this, in my state of Tennessee, unfortunately, you do have to provide your name. You have to provide your name if asked to identify yourself. Tennessee is one of those states. And if pressed or detained, you do have to provide your ID. That's just the laws in Tennessee. The thing about it is, they also do, what also is coming with law enforcement. Law enforcement can sometimes not look at a situation, just go, this ain't even worth checking into. For again, I don't blame that man for what he's saying, because he did comply. Of course, giving Pastor Jennings was not he's a pastor. All pastors go off autopilot. So I know it. And older people, I'm trying to be very nice about this. Seasoned individuals don't really function well, especially when pressed by law enforcement, especially those of the black generations. Older black people don't really take kindly to police. But again, that's why I said the officer, I will give him credit to a certain extent. He did try to de-escalate the situation. He tried up until he got annoyed, which was very quickly. Because if it had been me, he's looking at his profile, a suspicious individual. What's so suspicious? And again, this is why I'm on the pastor's side. What's so suspicious that you see him watering plants? Because, you know, I'm surprised he didn't sit there and say, if I was white, would you have just passed me on by, or would you have sat there and just came with a friendly tone and said, you haven't seen anybody around here that you never seen before, have you? No, because that's the part where I do side with him on, that you was profiling. Because you sat there and said a suspicious person. So the suspicious person you saw was a black man? Say what you will. Every black person will know how that feels. Every black person knows that feeling. Whether it's police, whether it's inside a grocery store, whether it's inside a clothing or a very fancy store, we get the looks, we get the follows, we get those people that are watching us because we're automatically deemed suspects, which is exactly where the officer failed in that. But again, I will say this once and I'll say this once again. The more knowledge you preside, the more knowledge that you gain, especially with the rights and what you can and cannot do in your hometown, the more you learn it, the better off you are. That's all I'm saying. But moving right along, guys, our last story again comes from Illinois, in which the Safety Act is being introduced. And, well, if you don't know what the Safety Act is, understand that it's a right idea, but needs some modifications a little bit.
A new state law that takes effect in January is spurring pushback from law enforcement and causing a stir on social media.
It's called the Safety Act, and it's aimed at reforming the state's cash bail system.
Tia back now with more on exactly what it will do.
Well, Natalie and Corey, there's a lot of confusion and possible disinformation out there, but one thing is for certain, change is coming. New Year's Day, Illinois will become the first state in the country to eliminate cash bail. Those that support the SAFE-T Act says cash bail criminalizes poverty, fuels mass incarceration, and disproportionately impacts communities of color.
You've been denied a bond because you're dangerous, which is good. Let's deny dangerous people bonds. But if they have a bond, we're saying you're not dangerous. We're just going to keep you in jail because you're poor.
DuPage County State's Attorney Robert Berlin says he supports bail reform.
You want the right people in custody. Violent criminals, people charged with violent crimes who are a threat to the public, should remain in custody pending trial. Everybody else has a right to bail.
But he's also concerned. The controversial law limits who can be arrested and held in jail based on the crime allegedly committed.
Judges will not have discretion unless the person is a willful risk of imminent flight.
Many members of the law enforcement community are working to have the current law amended.
I'm very concerned about an increase in violent crime. But again, I do want to stress there is still time to fix it.
Well, tied to this issue is an extremely controversial political ad that replays doorbell cam video of a woman being attacked on a north side sidewalk. Mike Flannery's coming up in a few minutes with a very different reaction.
Okay, so again, if you don't know what cash bail is, guys, cash bail, for the simple fact of the matter, as I said before, is really a system that needs to be abolished to a certain extent. Now, again, the reason why they said that is basically because of the SAFE-T Act. There were a list of things that would basically be removed as far as the reasons why you would not get a bail. And there has been a lot, oh boy, a lot of misinformation, if you will. So again, I have to point this out to individuals. That's why I sit there and say, please, oh please, oh please, do your research, because the simple fact of the matter is, a lot of it's going out there. Most of it is literally and figuratively misinformation. It really is. Now, I will say this best about this, because for the longest time, there was a thing going around about that, hey, if you were kidnapping somebody, that's a part of the SAFE-T Act. Or if you murdered somebody, then that's not a part, that's part of the SAFE-T Act, which means that theoretically you could be released. Now, this is the part where a lot of people may actually get mad. Because here's what I'm going to point out, that a lot of people need to pay attention. That for the simple fact of the matter, right? This is what they're talking about. Illinois non-detainable offenses that begin January the 1st. This is directly from Chicago's WGN, where they actually show under the new law, this is what they're saying. Now, of course, this this is the part where I say about misinformation, because this has been going around a lot, specifically in conservative areas for non-detainable offenses. Now, if you notice these non-detainable offenses, aggravated battery, aggravated DUI, fleeing, arson, burglary, drug-related homicide, intimidation, kidnapping, robbery, second-degree murder, threatening a public official. Now, the one thing I will say about this, and this is the reason why, that I stress so much that you always make sure that you check reputable sources whenever you see stuff like this. Because this WFCN News is literally a conservative-leaning media. This is not true. None of it is. That under the safety law, none of this is it. This entire thing, which again, if you see it on social media, completely fake. Now, the one thing I will say what's true is you can actually go to WNG site, or you can go to the State of Illinois Act, and you can see the SAFE-T Act. You can go out there and see it and be able to sit there and says, because again, that thing that I just showed, it's only certain crimes, where again, certain crimes, forcible felonies, stalking, domestic abuse, they guarantee the revoking of pretrial release, which means you stay in jail. That's been outlined. The only things And just to keep it short, just to keep you guys, to save you guys a click, to keep it short about the Safety Act, as long as a life wasn't hurt, multiple properties weren't damaged, you did not try to kill anybody, you did not try to kidnap anybody, you did not cause bodily harm, you were not a domestic terrorist, you were not a threat. As long as you're not any of those things I named, you will not be subject to bail. And that's the whole point. The whole point of cash bail is that, cash bail kept poor people in jail for extended periods of time. I mean, there was a guy who was at Rikers Island, New York for 2 years because he allegedly stole a backpack. Kyle, I forgot his name already. It's going to come back to me in a second. But that man allegedly stole a backpack, right? Could not make bail, went to Rikers Island, and eventually passed away there. Passed away before his trial. And that's the problem with cash bail systems, that they only benefit, they benefit bail bonds people. Bail bonds people have made $1 billion industry off this. And though, of course, the prison systems, usually owned by corporate entities, have made billions off of that. CCCA, Corporate Corrections of America, I think that's Correctional something America, but CCA, actually here based in Nashville, makes millions off the state because they own the majority of the prisons. Cash bail is literally designed to prevent poor people from getting out because they are more profitable as a prisoner than going into trial and running the risk of being released on their own recognizance. So yes, I am completely okay with cash bail being removed for a lot of low-level offenses. But unless you harmed, kidnapped, killed, attempted to kill, attempted to detain, became a violence, a menace, a threat, or terrorist, if you haven't done it, or arson, or try to, like I said, as long as you didn't try to burn or kill anybody or destroy property, you should be allowed. As long as you're not harming or hurting someone else, or the intent to harm or hurt someone else, as long as you're not doing that, you shouldn't have bail. Prison should be set up for those that truly deserve to be there. That's what bail's in for. And at the same time, a judge should decide whether or not a person, if they commit those heinous crimes, are a flight risk. If they are, bail should be revoked. Simple as that. But again, this goes back to what I said about misinformation and me showing that little part right there has been circulated around, and a lot of people think that that's actually going to be true, which goes to show you not only the dangers of social media, but the fact that we forget whatever you put out there, proofread. Not only proofread, but have the source and sites to back it up. Yes, it's that APA citation. Prove where you got it from. If it's reputable, cool. If it's not reputable, well, we know not who to listen to. But again, like I said, misinformation causes a whole lot more damage than actual truth sometimes. But that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and move on to our feel-good segment because usually on the Frack got here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom and sometimes make you lose your faith in humanity. But hey, it is the middle of the week. It's hump day. Tomorrow's Friday, pre-Friday, which is Thursday. So we're going to go ahead with a story that's going to basically, hopefully, put you some good vibrations in. And it's kind of lottery related as well because, hey, lottery draws tonight. If you haven't already got your Powerball ticket, if you haven't got it already. But I wanted to point this out of a man who literally thought he was going to go in and, get a little bit of change, walked out with a lot. I'm talking about this individual right here. This man in Virginia thought he won $600 off a scratch off, but just come to find out that he actually won nearly $1 million. A Virginia man that thought he won $600 off a lottery scratch off ticket, went into the lottery service center to claim his prize, and then found out he was the top prize winner in the 20,000 million lottery draw, which again announced his winning up to $1 million. Because again, that chance of him winning that $1 million prize was 1 in 1,754,000. Hey, you can't be mad. And those 20 ones, if you guys haven't noticed, because I know a lot of people that don't play lottery, those 20 million ones, I think they're like 10. Let's see, 20 times 20x. I think those are 10 because trust me, they got some higher ones. And I say this best because I said this to my son, and I'm going to say this to you guys. And I don't mean to be discriminatory, but if you guys are blowing $30 to $50 on lottery scratch-off tickets, you don't need the lottery. That's all I'm saying. But kudos to that guy thinking that he went there winning 600 and he came out there with some life-changing money. Because trust and believe, even in 2022, $1 million is some life epping changing money. But kudos to that guy. But before we do get out of here, guys, I do want to say thank you for everybody that liked, that shared, that let people know this is up and running. I certainly appreciate it. As always, some shameless plugging before I do get out of here. Shout out to my buddy Yvonne at BigBZA on all social. Yvonne was put on Facebook. Definitely check him out on TikTok, as he usually does his What is Big BZ Thinking, as well as his beats, because he's definitely back in his beats back again. But definitely give him a shout out, like and follow him there at BigBZA. Also, for me, guys, check me out on all socials at BlackBox447. I usually review everything I watch, even show some gym stuff, because I'm still trying to get this belly down. But I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, I'm all about encouragement. Again, being nicer, being kinder, not asking to be flat out good Samaritans, but especially with the brothers, learn to say hello, learn to conversate, because we have literally been cooped up for too long. And again, if you have friends, family, check on them. Check on them. We are all going through battles that nobody knows about, but at the same time, checking on your friends, your loved ones, your strong ones, everybody. You can do a lot more than bring a smile to their face. You may actually save a life in the process. And again, be nice, be decent. It takes zero energy to be nice. It takes 100% to be a dick. So don't be a dick. That also being said, guys, again, as you can see down there, of course, the ticker, let me make that just a little bit bigger. If you copy and paste that in your browser, it'll take you to our link tree that has the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of our podcasts. How the Frack got here, Get Bit, and of course, the Ultimates podcast. Definitely like, share, and let people know about it as I try to grow these podcasts. I really want them to grow. I give them water. I dedicate them. I dedicate my life to all of you. That didn't sound right. Anyway, definitely like and share and follow, guys. I certainly appreciate that. And again, tell people about it. And again, and also everything that we talk about, guys, I want to know your opinions on. Like I said, I believe in conversation. I believe in the fact of exchanging of ideas, that you can do so without having to be right, or having to beat your opponent senseless into the ground, regardless of their opposition. Like I said, we should be all about having conversations and less division. That's actually how we heal the nation. That also being said, guys, the last thing I'll say about how the Frack got here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply trying to give you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but also provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better as a society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, like electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first 4-star Black general in the armed forces. All those wonderful things. We don't learn from history. We are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up with your paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. Please wear a mask when you go out in heavy ass traffic, because coronavirus and the Decepticons are still there. But definitely take care of yourselves and each other, and we will all get through this.